Welcome to the podcast. My name is Douglas Gabriel. Today, I'd like to talk to you about the human heart. And specifically because Rudolf Steiner said that it was crucial that in the future, from his time, that the human heart would have to become understood as not simply a pump, but that it is a supersensible sense organ. Matter of fact, the most sensitive of all of the organs that you have, not just the five senses that we have, but we forget that the human heart can sense everything in the neurological system, the head, the spine, all the nerves, as well as the metabolic system. So the human heart stands in between and it's sensing that which is above and that which is below, that which is nerve sense system and metabolic. And in between the heart and the lung, we have the breath and the circulatory system. So this system is in fact the balancing system. It's the system of equilibrium. It's the central system. It's the core of the human being. And in the past, it was always considered to be female and was the mind, considered the mind. So when we talk in today's world, if you ask someone where their mind was, they'd point towards their head. But that's where your nerve sense system is analyzed, but it is not where you make decisions from. As a matter of fact, the Heart Mind Institute has demonstrated this over and over again, thousands of times in research and studies, and created devices that actually help awaken your intuitive heart sense. They demonstrate that the heart, for instance, I'll give you an example. This is just one of the things they do. They'll take a lot of pictures and put them on slides and put people in a room by themselves looking at the slides. And some of the slides are scary. And some of them are beautiful pictures of walking down a rose covered path or a primrose path or some ocean scene or something beautiful, but some are startling. And they show these at in an arrhythmic sequence, so that the person watching them never knows what's going to come next, and they don't know how long it will be on the screen or anything. But what they notice is, as they are going through these hundreds of slides, that the human being, the heart, because they're all hooked up to sensing devices, the human heart will sense and know ahead of time if they're going to be startled by the picture on the screen. Now you say, wait a second, that's predicting. That is basically psychism. That's clairvoyance. No, it's that the heart is your sense of timing. There's no time for the heart. The heart can look into the future. The heart can look into the past. Rudolf Steiner says that in the heart there is a chest or a box, and in that box is all of your karma from life to life. So you, when you want to say who you are, you need to point towards your heart right there and say, that's who I am. This isn't who I am. This is responding to the outside world of perception through sense, through your eyes, through your taste, touch, smell, of course, all those, the standard five senses. But your heart is a different type of sense organ that is sense-free. It can sense incredible dilutions of salt in your system, in your blood, or if there's a tiny amount of silica, or if there's, say, you're sensitive to it and you have too much salt in your blood, it can actually make you ill. It can kill you. It can sense what's good, what's bad. It can deliver the positive bacteria and get rid of the negative bacteria. The white blood cells go in and they clean the system. And the cells of your blood system come from basically your bones, is where the greatest amount of them are created new. But the ones in your bones have a nucleus, but the ones that come out of the end of your bones and go into your bloodstream don't have a nucleus. So they die after a short period of time. Rudolf Steiner was big on saying it was 3 days, but now they've studied it and they'll say, they last longer than that, but not much longer. So for a very short time, your blood, the blood cells that carry oxygen from your lungs to every part of your body and carry nutrition, glucose, to every single cell in your body through that blood, it holds the blood cells only for a short while, as they die. So they're sacrificing themselves. So when you talk about Christ's sacrifice of his own blood or the drinking of his own blood, this isn't a resurrection of the cannibalistic human and animal sacrifice, blood sacrifices of the past. No, this is about the fact that your consciousness rides upon your blood. And of course, what drives your blood, not as a pump, and we don't want it to be seen as a pump, because if it's a pump, then it isn't anything like the magnificent supersensible organ that it is. We can go into infinite descriptions of how wonderful the heart is, how magnificent the things the heart does are, if I got my verb correct. The heart does amazing things that can't even be explained. And of course, there are many parts of the body. If we would just turn and study the human body, we would study the entire universe. And the universe is not infinite, just like the human body is not infinite. And so they used to believe that there was a pressure. When the original British scientists came across this, they thought that they could measure the pressure that the blood had in it, in its flow, and that the pump, then they calculated how strong the heart would have to be a pump to push that. Well, now the calculations done with massive computers demonstrate that it is impossible that anything could have as a pump the pressure to be able to push the blood all the way out to the tiniest corpuscles, tiniest capillaries, where literally one single blood cell goes through and it may be carrying oxygen. And as it goes through that last teensy tiny opening, it turns around and starts to pick up carbon dioxide and carry it out. And so it goes from red blood to blue blood, from arterial to venous, and then it returns to the heart. And so it's at that moment they have now found out, Branco first, who worked with Ralph Marinelli, John Barnwell, William Marinelli, and some others, myself included. We set out years and years and years ago, decades ago, to prove, as Rudolf Steiner said, was necessary for our age to advance with Waldorf education, that we would need to have the understanding that the heart is not a pump. Now, Rudolf Steiner didn't tell us what the heart was, except he gives tremendous descriptions. And this entire talk is to point you at what is in the description box below, the book that I produced, which basically I wrote part of it, but other parts of it are taken from great thinkers like Rudolf Steiner. The human heart is a supersensible organ of perception. That's the name of the book. It's a free book. It's on our site. It'll be in the dialogue box below in the show notes. And you can go and get it for free as a PDF. We have numerous other books that you can get also through Amazon in hard copy, but you can't get this in a hard copy. There is no such thing. I don't have a hard copy of it. And it was basically created so that it would be completely free for everyone to get, because it is that important. My teacher, Dr. Werner Glass, made me promise, as a matter of fact, when I found a great translation of Rudolf Steiner's lecture called The Human Heart, that I would provide that for every single Waldorf teacher that I would encounter. And I promised him to do so. So that was put out years ago in my first book on the spirit of childhood. I put the human heart in there because if you understand what Rudolf Steiner says about the human heart, then you can understand the physical, etheric, astral, and ego, I am, nature of the human being. Those four elements, physical, etheric, astral, and ego, or I am, are the key factors to understand human growth for childhood education, or for any type of human education from birth to death. And so if you study the human heart, that lecture cycle, it will give you incredible insight into the way the world really works. And the human body, is the perfect hieroglyphic monad of the universe. Everything in the universe can be found in the human body, according to Rudolf Steiner, except for comets. But comets can be found in the human body when a woman is pregnant, because she's actually replicating what cometary nature shows us in today's age that was common in ancient times. And so we basically can say that the human body is the mysterium conjunctionis. It's the physical and etheric, and the astral and the ego are these four different bodies, and two of them stay in the bed at night when you're asleep, while the astral and the ego go out. So you have this incredible dynamic always happening, just like with the four ethers: warmth, light, sound, and life. Same exact thing, and they can interpenetrate, they can cross over, they can uh, go in and out of your body across the threshold into the spiritual world. So the human heart is the very thing that, through its ability to perceive, because right now it can perceive the everything that's in the blood, and the blood is your life. And so it can perceive life, but in its threefold form: thinking, neurological, sensory system, feeling, which is of course, the breath and lung system of balance and equilibrium, and the metabolic system. And what is that? That is basically your willpower. We see it as the limbs. It could even be considered, your metabolic system could be considered your jaw, because it moves so much, especially mine, your tongue, your limbs, your arms, your legs. These things move and they carry you through space, and through your upright posture, you're able to do magnificent things with your willpower. But they're controlled essentially through the seven organs. And the heart is the central organ, with six organs surrounding it, which represent the planetary influence upon the human being, what is called the harmony of the spheres. And so the harmony of the spheres, the balance between your organs underneath the cavity of your chest and your ribs, is controlled by the heart. So the kidney and the heart are directly linked, but so is everything. So is the pancreas, the spleen, the liver, your lungs, your skin, your the organs. Well, the skin is of course all over the body, but the sense of touch is also implicit in what these organs can do, because they're touching the blood, they're touching your food. So the six organs that represent the six major planets, and the seventh organ being the heart, representing the sun, that system is there. So your heart is sitting on top of those six organs and controlling them. But your heart also, through the vagus nerve, controls the entire nerve sense system that goes to your brain. As a matter of fact, the vagus nerve, which is what Rudolf Steiner, I believe, is referring to when he talks about the frontal spinal column. There's the normal spinal column, but there's one in front. But the one in front is only to be developed in the future, and it goes from the heart to the throat to the brow to the crown, to even higher. And that system of the frontal spinal column is depicted in ancient Indian teachings, and I put these in the book. I'm going to go over the content of the book in just a minute to try to entice you to take a look at this, because I don't know of a more important subject for our age. Because if you don't know how the heart is going to go through metamorphosis, then you don't know who you're going to become. And if you want to believe that you're going to become an angel, well, how does that process happen? How do you get the wings of an angel? It's all in the heart, and it's all in this book, and it describes it. It describes it mechanically, it describes it emotionally or through the soul, and it describes it spiritually over a long period of time, because the heart is going to go through a number of magnificent changes. And we are going to take control of the heart. Right now, it is an autonomic nervous system function of the heart. But think of it, when you blush because you had an emotion that controlled your heart, that changed the blood pressure of your entire system instantaneously and made you blush. So that's a sympathetic response. So in the future, we will no longer be ruled by the standard rhythms of the heart. We'll be able to expand those rhythms and grow wings on the heart called the auricles. They're already there. They have yet to be developed, and scientists today, doctors today, don't know what they're there for. But the great Egyptian clairvoyant hermeticist told us that the heart has wings, and that's why they always show the heart with wings. The many different faiths believe in that. But and the auricles, when they expand, because they're an expanding organ on on the atrium, on each side, left and right, as they expand, they make it look like the heart has wings. And so this secret, these mysteries of the human heart, Rudolf Steiner revealed a lot of them. He revealed the mysteries of the fifth chamber of the heart, but the sixth and seventh are these wings that I'm talking about, called auricles. And they are absolutely amazing. Now, the nerve process in that frontal spinal column has basically now been discovered through science to be the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve goes down from the heart into the metabolic system, reaches into all those six organs, and carries neurological information up through the vagus nerve across the atriosino node, which is basically where the burning flame of your heart, which is as big as your thumb, replicates the burning of the stars, the burning of the sun. It's the altar inside of the temple upon which the fire sacrifices are made. It's what the Vestal virgins were protecting. It's essentially what Hestia, the goddess Hestia, the goddess of the hearth. Your human heart is the hearth on the altar of the cosmos, reflecting back to the cosmos what it is and therefore what you will become. And that is not limited. The heart right now can do supersensible functions that create moral perception that can go into the spiritual world and be able to communicate, to hear the speech and language of the spiritual world and to also communicate with it. That's all done through the heart. It's called moral inspiration. There's also moral imagination, which is when your thinking turns into a higher form of thinking. And there's also moral technique, which is what happens when you awaken through your conscience, not consciousness, but through your conscience, the thing that bothers you when you're about to do something wrong, the thing that makes you feel guilt, that is coming from your kidneys. And the heart senses that. So literally, the heart through the vagus nerve coming through, right through the heart and right across the atriosynal node tells the heart what frequency to beat at. Now, when you're asleep, it's a 1-to-4 relationship, a perfect balance between breathing and heartbeat. And that's a magic number that happens each day. If you were to stay asleep for 24 hours, that number would be 25,920, the same number used for the Platonic year for the precession of the equinoxes, of the equinox. And this is encoded into the human body. In other words, the entire Platonic year is encoded into the human body daily. These rhythms that we feel through breath and heartbeat, through waking and sleeping, through consciousness and unconsciousness, through all those different rhythms that are going on, not just circadian rhythms, but also circadian rhythms that relate to the music of the spheres, the planetary influences, their magnetic, geomagnetic influences that come into us and affect those organs. Each of those 7 planets affect the 7 organs. And there's a certain metal and a mineral and an herb, even in a certain type of a tree that relate to each of those planetary influences. Those are called cosmic correspondences. But the human heart is the key to the whole thing. So you get to hear great thinkers say the most beautiful things about the heart. And so I tried to gather all of them that I could, or short phrases even from anthroposophists or anthroposophical doctors or great thinkers, and I put them into this book at the second part of the book called Great Thoughts About the Heart. And some of the thoughts that are the most pithy are things like this. William Shakespeare said, "Go to your bosom, knock there, and ask your heart what it doth know." So Shakespeare believed that the heart is where knowledge is created and held, wisdom. It's your mind. So in our own English language, there's references to this. Matter of fact, another great English um, playwright was Christopher Fry, who in a really terrible play, in the middle of it, says the most beautiful quote. I think I use it a lot. You've probably heard me say it, but it starts off with the phrase, "The human heart can go to the lengths of God. Dark and cold we may be, but this is no winter now." And then it goes on and on. And it basically says we must take the stride. We must take the step if we were going to reconnect with God. But think of that. The human heart can go to the lengths of God. Okay, so let's break that down. Most people would say God is our universe. It's the intelligent design of our universe. Matter of fact, many scientists, as Einstein pointed out, the more a scientist works with nature and studies nature through phenomena, the more they will acknowledge there is a divine presence in it. And that's absolutely true. Now, scientists will tell us the universe is no longer infinite. They used to say it's infinite. Now it has a border. And at that border, it's 10,000 degrees. And the speculation beyond what is on that border, there's not even a void beyond that void. They can't even conceive of anything to be able to tell you what is beyond the limit of the universe, but the universe is finite. And that, let's just take that. What is the universe? It's a big round sphere, but it really has the characteristics of what's called a 12-sided pentagon, which is a dodecahedron. So you could the most commonly accepted theory, and remember, science is just a bunch of theories that get changed all the time. The best theory now coincides with what Rudolf Steiner said. He said the cosmos was a dodecahedron. They now say the cosmos is in the shape of a dodecahedron, a 12-sided platonic solid. Well, the only problem is that if you go out one side of it, you come in from the other side. So there's magic involved. And when there's no magic involved, then it isn't a clear description of Mother Nature, because Mother Nature is nothing if she is not magical, because we can't cognize an enzyme being able to do a trillion or 100, so just be reasonable, 100 billion, but some do a trillion, 100 billion interactions in 1 second. Now, and never deletes itself. This is an enzyme. We without enzymes, couldn't create proteins. We couldn't digest anything. They're outside of us. They're inside of us. Our pancreas creates them. We don't understand them, and we sure don't understand the human heart. So the human heart can go to the lengths of God. So think of that. Your heart has something in it that is the key to the entire universe. Well, we were made in the image and likeness of God. Well, if we want to get close to where we are, our we, our I am, is in our heart, where our mind is. And so if you want to say that we are in the image and likeness of God, you'd have to say your heart looks like God. And it goes all the way out to your fingertips, to the furthest reach that your body can go. And it sends that blood out spiraling, bringing nutrition and strength and life. And then it turns and comes back and cleans up all the negative garbage and trash in your body and carries it out without us ever having to think a single thought about that. And how does it do it? It doesn't do it by the heart being a pump that keeps pumping. No, it is a ram pump. It takes the flow of blood, because your blood flows before your heart beats in utero. When you're in your mother's womb, your blood was flowing before your heart was beating. Your heart was only beginning to be formed, and it went through the stages that we see in some of the lower mammals, that it was developing the chambers. And the future chambers, the fifth, sixth, and seventh chamber, I'll talk about the fifth in a minute, but those chambers are the past, the present, and the future. And they are there to tell us that we are not beings in linear time. We are beings that are beyond time. We are, in fact, the message of Jesus Christ, which is we are immortal. We are eternal. And take that however you want it, But that is exactly the message of the heart. So if that were true, then what message would the heart be giving us at all times? Well, look out into the universe. What message is going on out there? Very clearly. Balanced equilibrium, exchange of forces, both positive and negative, until you come to a beautiful synthesis between in a spectrum of frequencies. That's what's happening in the universe. So you look to frequencies, as even Nikola Tesla said, if you really want to understand what makes up the universe. Well, the heart has a frequency that's the same as the Schumann resonance, which is 7.83. And the Schumann resonance is created by the Earth spinning. And it changes from the equator to the North Pole, but generally, and now it's speeding up because time is speeding up, but generally you can say that your heart beats at the rate of our globe. And then look closer, and you'll find that it actually pervades space, and that this particular frequency can't be stopped by anything. And it's so powerful that one could literally say it is a frequency that supports life. Now, that in the heart is one frequency. We also know there'd be a different frequency with the nerve ganglia in the throat, the nerve ganglia in the brow and the cerebral cortex, and the nerve ganglia at the top of the head at the corpus callosum. Those are different frequencies, and below in the solar plexus and the area below, those are also chakras. They have different frequencies. And we know this because ancient clairvoyants knew it. They put it into their Tibetan bells. So there's a bell that's just for the heart. And what frequency is it? 7.83 or 8. 8 sometimes it'll be. But the point is that it's a frequency that pervades the universe. Nothing can stop it. And when you're in balance, that's the frequency of your heart. Now, when we're awake, we're not in balance. When we're asleep, we're in balance generally, as long as you're not having a nightmare or something else, some kind of night trauma. So when we go unconscious, when we surrender, we go into the perfect relationship between breathing and heartbeat. And that creates a frequency. Now, that's just one of the thousands of mysteries and secrets of the heart. And I attempted to put hundreds of these, if not more. Matter of fact, there's things in there that you will be able to think about for the rest of your life if you are a scientist or if you're a religious person, a mystic. It doesn't matter, because when it comes down to the heart, it's the core of everything. Meister Eckhart said, God is born in the heart, and the heart is born in God. That's what I was just describing. God is born in the heart, and the heart is born in God. Meister Eckhart, who actually was, in a way, somewhat overlighted by Jesus Christ. He is a very profound teacher that we should certainly give attention to. Khalil Gibran, a favorite of everybody. Everyone has the Prophet in their library, don't they? Or some book of Khalil Gibran, his beautiful art. He said, beauty is a light in the heart. Light is a frequency. Beauty is always connected to truth and goodness. So if you have beauty, you have truth, beauty, and goodness, which Diotima, the teacher of Socrates, tried to teach him about love. As a matter of fact, Asperia taught the same thing to Pericles. And you have all these great female teachers who they said taught the art of love. And what is it that they taught in the art of love? That beauty instantaneously is connected to truth and to goodness. It has to be. And so they're one and the same. They can be considered different. So here you have the beautiful image of Khalil Gibran. Beauty is a light in the heart. Well, the heart is the sun of our personal solar system. It's the light. It's the warmth. It's the heart. It's the balanced sound of the 6 organs or the 6 planetary spheres, called the harmony of the spheres. So you have, and life then, of course, comes through that. Life comes through the heart. So warmth, light, sound, and life, or frequency, and light, and life, excuse me, come through the heart. Those are the gifts of the heart. And the sun does exactly the same for our earth on a uh, macrocosmic scale. This is the microcosm I'm talking about in the human heart, which is the exact replica of the macrocosm. But as we see things changing in our macrocosm in the universe, we also know that we will change and that the heart has to change. And that is a beautiful thing. So Rudolf Steiner, the emphasis of this entire book is to say the following. This is a quote from Rudolf Steiner. The heart is not a pump. The heart is an organ of perception. Now, science would probably argue with that, but then they would also tell you that yes, the heart can sense and change its rhythms in relationship to a tiny, tiny bit of difference in the chemistry of the blood. As a matter of fact, they would say that the bioelectric energy of the body, they used to say it came from the brain, and then they found out that the heart was somewhere between 10 to 100 to 1,000 times stronger in producing direct biological current. Now, people get really confused in calling this electricity. It's not. It is bioelectric energy, and it also is piezoelectric because in some cases, for instance, the calcium carbonate crystals in the pineal gland can cause electric, bioelectric discharges through the midbrain to the pituitary. And this is absolutely key to your staying alive, as it were. There's the master gland of the pineal and the pituitary, and of course, works with hypothalamus. It controls everything. That is from the vagus nerve. It goes all the way from the heart through the throat, through the into the midbrain of the head of the brain, and basically, then this is the communication, and then it turns around, goes down the hypothalamus, and goes down the spine. So you have what the Taoists call this cosmic circling going on, but it goes on from the back spinal column. It goes up, and then it starts in the head, but then it has to be generated from the heart. The real energy has to come from the heart, and it creates this frontal spinal column, this path of ascension, what Rudolf Steiner calls the etherization of the blood, earthly and cosmic nutrition. And when the earthly nutrition is enriched, and basically, essentially what's happening is you're taking carbon and you're transforming calcium into a really spiritual form of calcium called brain sand that is deposited in the pineal gland. And this is what the etherization is all about. So there's an earthly nutrition, and that goes and takes from your breath carbon that isn't being used and uses it to ionize oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen, and sulfur. And once it does that, in the process, it carries with it calcium and changes that calcium into calcium carbonate crystals, which are deposited in the pineal gland, which are directly related to your IQ. Not just related, it's equivalent. The more calcium carbonate crystals in your pineal gland, the higher your thinking capacities are going to be, or what could be called IQ, though I really don't go in for all of that, but that's what they use as a modern term. So this process is all from the heart. It often starts in the head, but it is really the heart that gives the energy. So when they found out, and they'll now call it a torus ring, or just a torus, and it looks like a donut, and it's the energy going up from the heart, goes into the head, and there's another torus, or in the head they call them gyruses, in the head, and they interact. And when they are linked, just like the heart math people have figured out, that when the heart and the thinking are both linked through the vagus nerve and through your spinal cord, going up to the hypothalamus into the midbrain, when all of that comes together and the pineal gland has a charge in it, a piezoelectric charge, it sends that charge through the cerebral spinal fluid and the third ventricle and lights it up. and takes the particles from the first and second ventricle and basically turn them into what you would call the fruit of the tree of knowledge. And that goes to your pituitary, and then your pituitary excretes pituitrin, and that enhances the life and the energy of your nerve system and your vascular system, your blood system. So this is a process that we describe quite completely in this book. And it's so very important because that's at the heart of so many religious traditions. When you get to the very core of what they're teaching, it is this exact thing. Now, this could be also told in mechanical terms. And we do need to do that. We need to do what Rudolf Steiner said, which was to take these spiritual ideas and to link them up with research going on in the outer world so that people will know that spiritual science is a science. It is not just spiritual mysticism. It's not just some guesswork of some clairvoyant telling you who their previous incarnations were. No, this is about science. So in the heart, going across the atriosinal node, you have the chemicals in the blood. I could get into great detail with them, but let's just say bases and acids. Bases and acids, calcium, magnesium, silica must be in there. Why? Because you need metallic mineral substances to go across a magnetic gap to create direct current energy. And so the heart creates all that bioelectric energy because the blood is, as it's returning to the right atrium, it's, of course, going to clean all that blood out, but it's also sensing what's in that blood. It's sensing because you send back what you don't use. And so there's the blood going out that is bringing nutrition, the blood coming back, basically, which is analyzing the body and telling the heart exactly what is going on, to the point that literally the chemistry of the blood can tell the heart whether there's a liver problem or a kidney problem or a spleen problem. And then the heart can make adjustments. The heart can, they now know that the fifth chamber of the heart, that you know the standard for, the fifth chamber of the heart is a sac, the heart sac. And inside the heart sac, in the last couple of years, they found that people who have basically healings of their heart, they couldn't figure out how some hearts heal themselves. They found that enzymes start to be created in the cardiac sac, in the pericardium, and that heals the heart itself. So the heart itself can not only sense there's something wrong with the heart and other organs, but then it can release enzymes and hormones that they didn't even know existed in the heart. And basically, they'll tell you our heart can't repair itself, but no, they can. I know. I was subject to that just 2 years ago. And so I know that it's true, and I know that it comes from your spirit that causes the healing. Because your spirit is basically speaking to your heart as your soul, and it's also your spirit, but it's the very thing that controls everything in your whole body. And what do they say is the number one thing for healing? Your attitude. If you're thankful and grateful, if you're filled with love, that is the greatest healing substance there is in the face of the earth, because it also is creating physiological conditions and excretions of your glands that do magical things. And I could go into great detail about certain types of excretions and what they do. But the point is, it's unknown. These things are literally unknown. Many of the things that I put in this book are literally not known by a cardiologist. And yet they're commonly known with the people doing the scientific research on them. And I'll go into a few more of those. So the fifth chamber of the heart, the pericardium, the heart sac, is in fact the magical device to heal the rest of the body. And that's big claims, but that's just going to the next step. We need to be able to heal everything out of the morality of love in your heart. That's what creates healing. That gives you the capacity to be a healer and also to heal yourself and also to help heal others, because it's simply bringing their frequency into the right relationship with the other organs and with the other sense neurological sense organs in your body. In other words, they'd be called the chakras if you're in the East. So when all of the chakras, the frequencies are all aligned and you have heart brain resonance, and then you have heart brain metabolic system resonance, then we would call that intuition. And intuition is basically the voice of God on the earth. It is conscience. It is the moral divine force that we find in ourselves, but we are here to create it ourselves. We're not just here to mimic and be a parrot and say, "Oh yes, I'm so glad I can now parrot what the angels are whispering to me." No, you have to decide that through ethical individualism. You have to decide that every single time you are confronted with evil or good, and you have to make that choice between choosing from the tree of knowledge, good or evil. That is what then aligns you with the frequency of the universe that causes your heart to be able to heal itself and to heal every organ in your body and everyone around you. And they now know that this bioelectric energy, which they keep calling electric and it's not, yet why is it bioelectric? Because literally the bases and the acids in your blood go across the sinal nerve node, and that creates the process that causes your heart to collapse, to fall into 0 point, to fall into nothingness, to fall into what science would call a black hole or a white hole, to fall into ether space, or what's called akasha. So every time your heart beats, it falls into the akashic realm, and everything that it sensed going out and coming in that one beat of your heart is then impressed into the akashic skein. It's impressed into the memory body of the empty space around what we would call, what science calls atoms, though they're not atoms, they're monads. And that empty space, because it's mostly empty, what is that? That's the recording device. That's the akashic ether. That's the mother of the other four ethers. Warmth, light, sound, and life came from the ether akasha. And that is what the heart is doing. As a matter of fact, the clairvoyants in the East would say that you look into the heart and you can see the pink drops or the magenta drops of morality that have been placed in the box of the heart. They can also look into your pineal gland, into your third eye, and see whether or not you have any calcium carbonate crystals in your pineal gland. But that's to give your intelligence. You don't have to have intelligence to have morality or to have spirituality. So they can look in and they see this. And there's a practice called tumo, where they literally teach you to strip all the skin off your body and kill yourself and offer yourself up, cook it all up, just like in the Vajrayogini practices where she's drinking her own blood, eating her own body. Why? Christ told us to drink his blood and eat his body. And that's really the process that is being described that happens in the human body on a constant basis. We are going through that process, and that is the process of initiation. So the Tumo practice is a death practice, and they literally say, and I've done this practice and been taught this, that if you're not careful, you can extinguish the fire that exists right between your heart. It's in your heart, and it's interacting with the oxygen coming from the lungs. So the fire from the oxygen of the lungs going to the heart, working with the chemicals that then create the bioelectric energy, creates a generator. And there's something similar going on in the brain. I described a bit of it a minute ago, but this process with the heart is called a magnetohydrodynamic generator. Because when you have flowing metals and minerals in your blood, you actually create a magnetic field. And that magnetic field is interrupted at the atriosinal node. And it senses then the chemistry of the blood, and that creates a dynamic that causes your heart to collapse, but it also sends an electrical impulse. And the electrical impulse is, of course, coming from the vagus nerve that goes right across that point. And then that goes up into the head. And so it's all connected. It's all connected through the heart. But there's even more amazing things, because science now has gotten to the point where they can put a watch. It's like looks like a watch. They put it on your wrist and they measure your heartbeat for 24 hours. Then they take it and they analyze it and they can tell you how long you're going to live and very likely what organ is going to fail because your heartbeat tells that. As you know, in Chinese medicine, they take their fingers and they put it in the same exact spot to feel your pulse, and then they feel 3 levels of your pulse, and through that they can tell what's wrong with your organs. They can tell all kinds of things about you, right? Well, at this point, they can predict how long you're going to live right now with one of these devices. It's called variable heart rate. And you can get this analyzed if you want to have it analyzed. But the point is that you should already know. And the other point is you don't need to know because your karma is in your heart. If you want to understand how long you're going to live, you need to understand your karma. Just look to your heart. Just look to see if you've resolved all negativity with all beings and made sure that, before words come out of your mouth, they can no longer harm anyone. Before you do a deed, you know that it's not going to harm anyone. Once you get to these points, then you know that your variable heart rate is going to be variable. Because why? When you look and you see misery, it changes your heart rate. When you look and you see someone hurting someone, it changes your heart rate. And that's why you shouldn't be watching too many violent movies or things that shake you up, because it shakes up your heart, causes your adrenals to release adrenaline, and it rushes to your brain and causes your brain to think that you're in a trauma condition. And so your heart, if it has a variable rate, is a really great thing. When your heart just becomes calcified and it becomes a very standard and you're just an automaton and you no longer have joy and happiness in life and you're ebullient and all this stuff. No, you don't have that anymore. Well, then your heart is going to be cold as a stone. That's the way they used to say it in poetry. But it's basically going to become less flexible and less variable. They can also look at a child in utero, in their mother's womb, measure the axis of the heart and whether it leans. The axis is generally around, in utero, it's around 45 degrees. Once you're out of utero and you're born, it turns to about 23, the same incident as the axis of the earth. But if it's variable and it goes to the left or right, front or back, or goes off to being more 45 or less than 23, you're going to get sick. And they can predict exactly what part of your body is going to be affected. So they can look at a child now and do what's called the electronic axis of the heart and predict if that child is going to be born with physical challenges, and practically predict what the weakest part of their body will be, and therefore what they will probably have trouble with in terms of illness as they get older. So your heart has in it, before you're born, all the secrets of your life. It has in this box, and by the way, let me describe this box. In ancient Tibetan wisdom, taken from, of course, India and mixed with Bonpo religion, they believed that a long, long time ago, a meteorite or something burning came from the sky, and it was a box. Very strange, this story. It's a box, a fiery box, that if you touch it, you had to be careful. It could burn you up. But it was gold. But finally, they figured out how to open it. And when they opened it, there were 4 things in it. There was a metal begging bowl. Now, I should probably elaborate on this. A begging bowl in Tibet, a metal begging bowl, is also a bell. And that bell usually has the 7 metals in it, just as I'm talking about. The 7 metals are all put into the metal that is used for a true Tibetan bowl, which is a bell. But it's also the begging bowl of Buddha. And literally, there is one still in Sri Lanka that you can go look at, actually 2 places, where they say they have the begging bowl of the Buddha. But what is that begging bowl of the Buddha? It's the bowl that sits in your chi area, what they call the vase. So the bowl is the vase, but the vase is the fire that comes from your lower chakras. And so to begin with, one of the gifts that fell from the sky is the ability to create enough energy that you can do this etherization of the blood, and so that you can have enough fire going on that you can create extra carbon to ionize these other substances that I described. Next to it was the wish-fulfilling stone. Well, the wish-fulfilling stone is found in the human heart, and it's called the Sintamani stone or the Sintamani tree. A tree because it's the vagus nerve they're taking a picture of that goes up into the tree and blossoms into the head. So and on it has 3 letters, AUM, as we would say, Aum. In other words, thinking, feeling, willing. So that's the soul. So there's the body, the soul. And then there is the Prajnaparamita was in this fiery golden box that fell from the sky. And the Prajnaparamita is a book of wisdom. It's the book of wisdom, let's just call it so. It's the ability to turn knowledge into wisdom. And then the last thing was a little stupa. But the stupa is a picture of the human body when it finally evolves in the far future to what it's supposed to become. It will look like a stupa. Now, a stupa is, you see them in India, you see them in Tibetan Buddhism, everywhere. They put them everywhere. All it is a geometric relationship of the physical, etheric, astral, and ego bodies. And so in this box is basically the understanding of the constitution, the fourfold constitution of the human being. Now, strangely enough, Rudolf Steiner referred to the box around the heart, and he also referred to the box in the heart. And in that box is your karma. Well, the box around the heart is literally true. There's a thing called the media statum, and there's 6 of them: above, below, front, back, left, right. They surround the heart. So the heart, with the heart sac, the 5th chamber of the heart, sits in a box, literally. And when you look at this, you go, oh my gosh, why did no one ever tell us that the heart sits in a box? And that protects it from being damaged because it's such a sensitive organ. It has to be protected by these. Actually, there are 4 of them, but 2 of them are separated, so it's 6. And that creates what? A cube. Forward, backward, left, right, up, down. That's a cube. So your heart is literally sitting in a cube. But in the future, that cube is growing into what the universe is. And the universe is the shape of a dodecahedron. So the cube of your heart becomes a tesseract that turns into a dodecahedron that can go out to the length of God, to the length of the universe, and then collapse and come back in upon itself and start again. Or, as they say, go to the exact opposite side of the dodecahedron, and then it'll start coming in from that direction. But anyway, the point is it's expansion, contraction, expansion, contraction. So we go in the cube and we try to expand. What happens? You can only go forward, backward, left, right, up, and down. And there's limits to that. That is the box that we're in. Our consciousness, this image of God that we are, is in the box of the heart. It's surrounded by a box, and it's going to change. As a matter of fact, people don't realize that the muscle tissue of the heart can be unfolded and turned into a long strip. It's basically been folded as a Mobius curve figure 8, and then has evolved into something that is going to keep on evolving. And what did it do? It came in and it surrounded the flow of the blood. The flow of the blood in utero creates the heart. And so what's the flow of the blood? That is the energy of the stars. And the energy of the stars comes rushing up through our feet, through the earth, up into our heart. And the energy of the sun and the planets comes roaring down through our head into our heart. And these 2 spiraling vortices meet in the heart, and they actually go beyond each other. So, the one coming up, the one going down, and right in the middle, Rudolf Steiner says that is the silhouette of the heart. That is 2 different spiral vortices of 2 different speeds meeting. And because the speed of the one coming from the ground, coming through the earth from the stars, is faster than the one coming from the sun and the planets, it creates the axis of your heart. And so, in other words, your relationship to the divine and your relationship to the world create the angle of your heart, and the angle of your heart creates your health. It also, whether you're forward, backward, left, right, up, or down, creates illness if you're not in the middle. And that means when your cube is not balanced, it creates illness, both physical, psychological, and spiritual illness. So the real trick is to turn your heart into a sense organ that can start to experience everything going out in 12 different ways, not just the 6 ways around a cube, but the 12 different ways that you can basically turn into a sphere. Because that's what the heart, like all perfect things in the universe, are spherical. That's the reason water turns into a spherical drop. That's the reason planets are round. It's the reason that it's basically the form of the material world. And so we essentially and eventually will become a sphere. The heart will go first, and it'll turn into a dodecahedron, like from a cube through a tesseract, through conquering space, conquering time, conquering consciousness. It will transform into the 12-sided dodecahedron. In other words, a perfect, exact image of the entire cosmos. And when that happens, of course, then we will find out that there are higher rhythms than just the Schumann resonance or the rhythm and energy that we have that maintains our physical body and creates the warmth, light, sound, and life, 7.83 hertz, 7.83 vibrations per second. That will be found in the future to be the lowest realm. As we evolve, it will go into higher frequencies and higher frequencies. And pretty soon, things like ultraviolet won't harm us anymore. We'll be able to directly take our nourishment from the sun. Right now, the atmosphere is there to filter it all out so that it doesn't overwhelm us and kill us, essentially. But we are evolving every single day, and humanity is evolving over time, and our DNA is evolving. And as time goes on, our heart will become a supersensible organ that will literally be able to not only accept the warmth of the sun, which then creates warmth inside of us, the light of the sun, which creates our nerves, the light that's inside of our nerves, inside of us, the sound or frequency of the sun, which we can't fully accept now because we don't run our organs. We don't maintain our organs. We don't control our organs. They are autonomic. They're not sympathetic, but in the future they'll be sympathetic, and that will then be controlled through the sound ether or the harmony of the spheres. And then eventually it will rise up into the realm of life. And at that point, we become co-creators with the entire universe. So the universe is not big, folks. The universe has been bound up into the fire on the altar of the heart, and it is there so that it can grow into a fire that can encompass the entire universe. And each and every one of us is that way. And it isn't, there are many universes, and they were what Steiner calls zodiacs. We will all evolve to the point that we will, in fact, be able to embody an entire zodiac, in other words, all the stars, inside of our consciousness in the far distant future. So the heart is the key to that. It is the ladder to heaven. It is the 7-story mountain. It has these 7 chambers, just like the brain has 7 chambers, and the 7 chambers of the sun and the 6 organs are underneath your rib cage. So these 7 different chambers are replicating what happens in the universe. And as we grow into it, then we indeed become exactly as the image and likeness of God through our hearts.